Hello my bookish friends, welcome back. I am Elizabeth, this is Reading Riley. Today we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of June. I have my air conditioning turned off in Texas in the dead of summer to tell you about this uninterrupted by the loud noises. So I am making sacrifices here. And I appreciate your sacrifices as well. Hit the like and subscribe button. Oh my god, I'm totally kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, I have 12 books to talk to you about today, and one of them is a DNF. Again, as usual, we're going to start with my lowest rated books, and then we're going to work my way all the way up to my highest rated books. I do have 3 5-star books this month, so that's exciting. And I have 1 DNF and 1 1-star. Which is very rare for me. Overall, I do feel like it was a very good reading month. There are a lot of 4 stars and 5 stars altogether. Some 3, 3.5, but pretty solid month. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I want to start out with my DNF. I read about 30% of this one before I was just like not interested and put it down. I'm trying to DNF more. And so if I do, I'm going to let you know about it. This one is House of Cotton by Monica Braziers. This has a 3.18 on Goodreads. I DNF'd this. I think I can see where it was trying to go, but it just didn't get there fast enough for me to be interested and be able to continue on with it. We're following a 19-year-old Magnolia. She works at a gas station. She's down and out. She used to live with her grandma, but her grandma passed away, and so now she's trying to pay the rent, and she's having a really hard time doing that. And her landlord is just very predatory and just not a good human. Gross man. So one night, this guy walks in and he offers her a job working at this funeral home. The job that he's asking her to do is like this modeling job. It's in the funeral home and it's for people with very specific interests. And I think this is where, like right where I stopped is probably where it was about to start getting more and more weird. It's definitely uncomfortable. There's definitely social commentary in there, but it was just so slow moving that I could not stick with it. And I was just like not interested. So I put it down. And here I turned off the AC and the cicadas are like out of control. They think they own this bitch. They don't. Now let's move on to my 1-star book. I only have one of them, thankfully. That is Killing It by Mike Bakoven. I was so excited for this new release of his after loving Fantastic Land so much by the same author. I loved Fantastic Land last year. It was in my top 10 of the year. I thought it was Fantastic Land, okay? But this one did not live up to it, and now I'm questioning if I really liked Fantastic Land or if I was taken in by the interview style formatting and the exceptional audiobook. I don't know. I'm questioning myself. The description of Killing It is, it's a slasher horror book featuring comedians in this comedy house called The Square that's been around since the 1980s, and apparently long ago something terrible happened there and there's this ghost. Now, if you've been with my channel for a while, you know that I'm iffy about ghosts, and the one thing that I need in a story about ghosts is purpose. I need the ghost to have a reason for being there and a reason for doing the things that it does. I also need to see its influence on other people, neither of which this story accomplished. We're following, what is his name? Jaff. His name's Jaff. So we're following Jaff. He's the owner of this club. When he buys it, there's this like random little boy that's like, when she comes to you, don't listen. And he's like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. He owns this club for years and years, and then one day he hears the voice of this ghost and she tells him to kill everybody. And he's like, okay. And so he does. And that's this entire story, is him killing everybody, them trying to survive. They're all comedians. So there are, what I did like about this, I will say, there is a lot of tribute to comedians and like old school comedians like George Carlin. You can tell that he really does love comics. And so that was part of the thing that drew me into this, because I like comedians as well, and it's an interest of mine. There is also some commentary in here about women in comedy. Similarly to women in corporate America, they also have a harder time. There is talk about one of the comedians coming out as having been a sexual predator, and so there's stuff that's being discussed that's happening in real life, so it's kind of bouncing off of that and having some commentary about these things. And also, this cover just drew me in. I loved this cover so much. I thought it was gorgeous. But there was no motive for Jeff. And for all intents and purposes, he's a good guy. His entire life, all these people like him. And then he's just like, nope, she said to do it. I'm gonna start killing people. What? What? No, I need more than that. And eventually it does go back and say, like, this happened before, and they start to make connections where they're in the same building years and years ago. There was another mass killing. Okay, but like, who's the ghost? Is she one of the victims of that? Like, and why does she have this power, and why is she staying there? Like, there were just no answered questions, and it all felt like I didn't care about the characters. They just kept dying. I was not here for it. I should have DNF'd this, and I didn't, because I just kept thinking it's going to get better. It's going to explain itself. It's going to make sense, and it did not. So unfortunately, this is just extremely disappointing for me, and it's a 1 star. So I didn't have any 2-star books, which is great. So we're going to move on to my 3-star reads, which I have 3 of, I believe. The first one, first of all, I went into it with the wrong expectations. So I'm going to try to set you up with the right expectations if this is something you want to read. But that is Not So Perfect Strangers by L.S. Stratton. This has a 3.66 on Goodreads. I gave this 3 stars. So a little bit below average for me. Let me tell you what this synopsis says, because this is what I was expecting going in. It says, one fateful encounter upends the lives of 2 women in this tense domestic thriller, a modern spin on Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train that flips the script on race and gender politics. Tasha and Madison Gingell may have very different everyday realities, but what they have in common is marriages they need out of. The 2 women want to help each other, but they have very different ideas of what that means. Based on that, and another review that I saw of this, I went into this thinking that it was going to be just rife with social commentary. As we're learning how different these 2 women are, Tasha is a Black woman who lives with a very manipulative and abusive husband with her teenage son. They're struggling to make ends meet. Meanwhile, on the opposite end, we have Miss Gingell, what is her name? Madison, who is this affluent white woman, and she is not okay with her relationship either, but for very different reasons. She thinks she caught her husband cheating, but she doesn't really know, but also they cheated when they first got together. As we go on, I just liked Madison less and less and less, and I started to get really confused about why we are not exploring these racial dynamics between these 2 women, because as the reader, I really identified with Tasha. I felt her struggle. She felt like a 3-dimensional character. She felt like she elicited empathy and emotion from me, whereas Madison did not at all. So I'm like, why are we making this a Black woman and a white woman? Why are we even making it about race if we're not going to explore both sides of that? I don't want to spoil the twist for you, because it definitely is its own take on Strangers on a Train. It's doing its own thing, and there is social commentary in here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there is no social commentary. There is, but it's not what the story is about. There is social commentary in here because of these characters that we're following and the reality that we live in. Like, we have to be realistic about reality, right? And so the implications of that is that, you know, it's going to be a lot easier for one of these women to get away with something like this, whereas opposed to Tasha, the Black woman, if she's going to be implicated in these crimes, it's going to have way different consequences for her. The risks are completely different. Just the idea of these 2 women who are going to help each other in this way, it does bring up some social issues, which I liked that, but that's not what this story is about, and it totally veers in a different direction. And like I said, I'm not going to spoil it, but the thriller part of this, think of this as a domestic thriller that's a little bit more diverse than our typical domestic thrillers, which we need more of. I agree, we need more of that. But that said, the thriller part of this didn't really do it for me. So I'm giving it 3 stars. Next 3-star book is The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. I am still kind of trying to decide if Frida McFadden is an author that I like. I definitely think she pulls off twists well, but I also think she sacrifices some things for that in the vein of like a Riley Sager. So I can see why people really like Frida McFadden, but I just don't know if she's for me yet. I gave this one 3 stars. This does have a 4.16 on Goodreads currently, which is very high. And I gotta say, I liked this character from the start, and I got sucked into this character. We're following Nora. She is a surgeon. She's living in the shadow of her father, who was an infamous serial killer. He killed all of these women when she was a kid in their basement behind this locked door, and she found out about it. She changes her name. She doesn't want to be connected to him whatsoever, and she's terrified that somebody's going to find out. And she's also battling with what is inside her because of that. Like, what has she inherited from him in this darkness that she's kind of afraid of touching and exploring within herself. But she's like this cool girl. She's a surgeon. She's saving lives every day, and she's using that to kind of convince herself that she is a good person because she saves lives. And every day after work, she goes to this bar. It's like her own little Cheers, and she goes and she drinks old fashions. So of course she's cool in my book, but she does come off as kind of like too much of the cool girl in my opinion a little bit. This entire plot revolves around the idea that she cannot open up. There are so many moments in here that were so frustrating for me because she's just making bad choices after bad choices after bad choices because of that fear. And if that hadn't been there, like, none of this book would have happened. It completely relies on this idea that she is afraid to open up to anybody. So that was a little bit frustrating for me. The draw is that young women start dying, and these women have the same look about them as the women that her father killed when she was young. These women also are killed in the same fashion, the same MO. It's looking like her father's killing these women, but he's been in jail for 26 years, and we cannot forget that he's been in jail for 26 years because she mentions it like every chapter. 26 years. I want to know how many times, if you have a Kindle and you've read this on Kindle, I think you can look up the word usage. Please look up how many times she says 26 years for me, because it's astounding how many times she reminds us of that during this. Anyway, so her father couldn't have done it, and they're finding connections to her. And so it looks like somebody's trying to frame her for this. She's in trouble. She's got to figure out how to prove that she's innocent. I'm not in the medical field, but I do feel like the details that McFadden writes about medicine and surgical medical things like that, they sounded impressive to me as a layman. So I believe that she did do her research. I will give her that credit. And I ended up having a decent time with this one. Like, it was not bad, but there were just so many terrible decisions made and so many frustrating moments for me. She was smarter than that. You know, like, if this was a real person, she would have made smarter decisions, I feel like. So, and it felt convenient for the plot. So I'll say that. Next, I have one more 3-star book, and this book I read with the Literally Dead Book Club this month for Kayla's live show, and we talked about it in depth. So if you haven't seen that, I will link that down below and above, and check out our full thoughts on that. This one I'm also giving 3 stars because while I think this story is like a very clever crime mystery, I think some things got lost in translation. So this is called The Devotion of Suspect X. This is by Kaigo Higashino. I probably said that wrong. I apologize. This is translated from Japanese. This author in Japan is huge. He's like the James Patterson. He's the Tom Clancy, he's the guy. He's got so many books, and I totally get it because his writing is very smart and it's very clever. We're following Yasuko, who lives this very quiet life working in a Tokyo bento shop. She's a very good mother to her daughter, but when her ex-husband shows up at her door, he completely flips her life around. We also follow her next door neighbor, Ishigami, I think is his name. And he is a mathematician, like a genius mathematician. The way the plot is worked out is a very intellectual. It's clever, it's witty, and it's so smartly written. I will say though, I watched the adaptation for this which if you're interested is on freebie through Amazon Prime, and it's got English subtitles. Just through that movie, and I don't know, here's the thing, I don't know if the difference that I felt, the connection to the characters that I felt from watching the movie was something that was originally in the book and got lost in translation, or if that was the decision of the director or the screenwriter to add more character work in the movie. But I will say that the characters in the movie, the things, the details that we put in there made me feel so much more connected to these characters than I did from reading this story. So again, I don't know if it is something that's lost in translation or if it's something that was just left out of the story. But when I watched that adaptation, I was like, okay, I really get it now. I really connect to these characters and I understand this. And that was just something that I did not get from the story, which is why I gave it 3 stars. But this is not a whodunit because we know from the very beginning whodunit. This is one of those where we're trying to figure out how or trying to figure out why. I have to respect it, but I also just did not get that emotive feeling that I wanted to get from it. Next, we're going to move on to 3.5 stars. I think I only have one. My only 3.5 star read this month was I Didn't Do It by Jamie Lynn Hendricks. This is a debut novel and it is about thriller writers. And so that said, I thought this was going to be a thriller, but I actually would categorize this as more of a mystery than a thriller. That said, I had fun with this. We're following these 4 thriller writers at a thriller writing convention, and there, someone is murdered. Of these 4 characters, they each have their own POV. We're following 2 men and 2 women, a mid-lister, an egomaniac, a has-been, and a newbie. And all 4 of these are kind of quirky characters. I really liked the character work in this one. They all have their own little eccentricities. There is a Twitter account that is following only the 4 of them saying, hey, you might be next. And they're also getting text messages from this person. And so they're like, oh my goodness. And each of the people have secrets that this person knows about them that they may or may not be threatening to expose. So the 4 of them get together to try to figure out who is trying to set them up, who is the killer, etc. And it's all leading up to this awards ceremony where the killer has promised something big. There's going to be some kind of big reveal. Maybe they're going to expose them. We don't know. What I really enjoyed about this one was that there was all of this insight into the publishing industry and into the kind of cultural hierarchy among authors and kind of their inner circles and what is, like, it felt like it was giving me tea on the publishing industry that I was like, okay, what else? What else? I want to know. Also, there's some not so subtle commentary about the chokehold that Twitter holds over book publishing in general, which was appreciated. My jaw didn't drop at the twist, but I had a good time with this. The character work was well done. They were quirky. It's more kind of a lighthearted thing, and if you want that insider publishing tea, that commentary about Twitter, then pick this one up. You might enjoy this one. Next, we're moving on to my 4-star reads. I have 4 of them this month, so that's exciting. The first 4-star book that I want to talk about this month is The Marriage Act by John Mars. We read this for the Midnight Society Book Club, which is my book club. It's a free book club if you want to join. All of the information is down below, all of the links. It is totally free, and we just go live once a month to talk about the books on this channel. If you want to watch that live show, I will also link that above and below, and you can get the really full in-depth kind of ideas of how we felt about this in general. I was joined by my IRL BFF Sandy as well as Nikia from Nikia's Hideaway, and we all had different different levels of enjoyment on this one, so it did make for a good interesting conversation. And there is a non-spoiler section as well if you haven't read it yet. So anyway, what is this about? This is about a near future in Britain where there has been an act passed called the Marriage Act. If you are married, you are given advantages over other people. This is very much like a dystopian techno thriller, 5 minutes into the future. What I love about John Mars's writing. If you're married, you get certain privileges. You get tax breaks. You get to live in the nice side of town. You get health care. And so all of these things are like pushing people to get married. It really makes you question, like, would you do it for that? These marriages are also being monitored by the government by these devices that are kind of like a Google Home, kind of like an Alexa. If any of these relationships are deemed to be hurting, based on what this device is overhearing, then they send in these relationship advisors, and it gets leveled up, and it's kind of like, you know, DEFCON level whatever, until this person can either decide that you two should no longer be married and force you to get divorced. Also, if they think you're taking advantage of the system and you're not actually in love. There are a lot of different things. We're following, like, I think 5 different people, 5 different points of view, and John Marrs does this so well, where he takes all these different types of situations with different socioeconomic statuses, with different sexual orientations. It's very diverse in that way. Nakia did say that she thought that this was kind of pushing a narrative, a political narrative. If you don't like stories like that, you may not enjoy this one. I will say I'm already going on too long about this, considering I have an entire video dedicated to this. It didn't hit me like I wanted it to. Honestly, like, I probably could have given this 3.5 stars, but it did everything that I loved from The One and The Passengers by John Marrs as well. All of those things that he does, the way that he writes his characters, the way that he talks about social things, the way that he sets it so close to reality that you're like, this could happen. I love all of those things. It may have been a little bit long, but I still think this was a good book, which is why I gave it 4 stars. But anyway, if you want the rest of the thoughts, please check out that live show. My next 4-star book is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. This is the Bridgerton story with Penelope and Colin. I have not read any of her books before. I just fell in love with the Netflix show and loved it. So this is, I think, book number 3 or 4 in the series. And I actually skipped over one that has not been mentioned on the show yet. But I was just so interested in Colin and Penelope based on what I've seen from the Bridgerton show, and so I had to pick this one up because I was like, I need to know their story. And I really loved it. I loved Julia Quinn's writing. I loved, you know, I'm very picky about my sex scenes in romance books, and I loved how she did it. Nothing made me go, ugh, like, nothing felt cringy to me or weird. It definitely sat right for me, and I'm so glad that I started the month with this because it just set a good tone for me. I had fun. It was a quick read. So if you're interested, like I was, in finding out what happens with Penelope and Colin, then I would definitely recommend picking this one up if you don't want to wait for the show. Next, we have The Hostage by Claire McIntosh. I gave this one 4 stars. It has a 3.92 on Goodreads. It's a survival thriller. And it is, I say thriller, but it's kind of leans towards suspense because of the pacing. The pacing's a little bit slower on this one. I will give it that. I kind of have to put that out there. Otherwise, you would expect it to be very quick, like a typical thriller. And it's not that, but it's very well done, and I had a really good time with it. The tagline of this is, you can save hundreds of lives or the one that matters most. And we're following this inaugural nonstop flight from London to Sydney, which, like, it's the first time they've ever done this nonstop flight, so it's a big deal. There are all kinds of celebrities and journalists on board, and we're following Mina, who is one of the hand-picked flight attendants to be included on this inaugural journey. But we also find out that she's kind of there on accident because of her story. We get really into her backstory in her life as we're reading what's happening right now in this moment on this plane. So it kind of keeps going back and forth, and you learn about the stakes for her. Like, what are the stakes for her? She has an adopted daughter, and she's newly separated from her husband. And so they're very much trying to figure out how this dynamic is going to work for them and what went wrong and why they split up. Just as the plane takes off, Mina receives a note from one of the passengers, a threatening note that is forcing her to ensure that this plane never reaches its destination. And if she does not comply, it would be at the expense of her daughter, who is back home. So they are threatening her daughter. They're blackmailing her and saying, if you don't do what we ask, we are going to hurt your daughter. And so that is kind of the inciting incident. That is what everything depends on in this story. It was very cleverly told. All of the different points of view from the characters are just labeled by their seat number, so you really don't know who is who. As you're learning the background, you just know, so you're kind of putting together, as you're getting information from each person that might talk about like, oh, the guy up there that looks like this, and then you get to his point of view, who is like seat E34 or whatever it might be. And you're like, okay, that connects with that, so this must be that guy that they were referring to. So you're kind of putting everything in your head together as you go and trying to connect the seat numbers to the characters. This was very high stakes, it was high octane, it was intense, but there are a lot of POVs in here. So I do think that reading this one physically might be a little bit better than listening to audio like I did, because there was not a full cast in the audio. If there had been, I feel like that would have made it a lot easier to differentiate between these different points of view. I had to continually check to see whose point of view I was listening from, because there was no other way to distinguish that. So that was a little bit frustrating as far as my audio experience goes, but I did read this in 2 days. For a longer book, it was a pretty quick read for me, but like I said, the pacing is slower. Also, the ending is a little bit far-fetched. You have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but it got darker than I expected, which was really what solidified this as a 4-star for me, because I love that little bit of like darkness in the end that's like, oh, okay, we didn't see that coming. Just a hair darker than your typical mystery thriller. Suspense, if you will. So yeah, I did end up having a good time with this one, and I do recommend it. My last 4-star book that I want to talk to you about is The Vanishing Hour by Serafina Nova Glass. This is my second read from this author, and I really enjoy her writing so much. This has a 3.85 on Goodreads, so I gave it a little bit higher than average rating. The synopsis of this story does not really make it stand out among other modern thrillers, but the writing does. The writing is what separates this from other thrillers, in my opinion. It's written in a way where you are meant to kind of figure out what's going on as you're reading it, but you're figuring it out with these people. And so the way I explain it is it's like one of those stories that opens up multiple timelines for you in your mind, and you're like, okay, as you're given this clue, you're like, okay, so it could have been that person, that person, that person, and then as you're given more clues, you're crossing off those motives, and trying to narrow it down as you go. So it really kept my mind going the whole time, and that's what I liked about it. It just kept me thinking. It kept me, and not about like social things or anything like that, just about the mystery here, how these people are connected. I guess I should tell you what it's about. We're following really 3 main characters, 3 points of view. We're following Grace Holloway, who actually reminded me of Emma from the new Taylor Adams. She is running away from her past. She's got secrets in her past, and she's managing this inn in this small town. It's East Coast, small town vibes, and it's the end of the like tourist season. And so she's like, okay, everybody get out. I just want to be alone with my dog. And she's trying to just close the doors up and just stay there and keep watch over this inn during the off season. She, in her past, was victimized and she escaped. And so she's very much trying to hide from the world. We're also following a man whose 73-year-old father has gone missing. He's coming back to this small town where he grew up to look for his father. And he's got a lot of family dynamics happening that he doesn't want to get too deep in. And so he's decided to stay in this inn instead of staying with his mom and his brother. Grace kind of has to let him in because it's not really technically the end of the season yet, so he's kind of imposing on her space, and with his father missing, it's making her uncomfortable. And then we're also following this other woman who is missing her daughter, who went missing a couple of weeks ago. This small town is the last place the daughter was seen, and so as these 3 kind of start to get together, we start to get to know them better, and their paths cross. We understand that they are all connected, but not in the way that you might expect. So I really thought the plot was very eloquently woven. This does have like a certain amount of poise to it, I would say. I felt like this one was compulsively readable. I did not want to put it down. I finished it in 1 day. And I think this would be a really great summer beach read. If you're looking for like a thriller to read on the beach this summer, I think this one would be perfect. All right, and now we're gonna move on to my 5-star books. I'm so excited to talk to you about each of these. The first one is a nonfiction book. It's actually a memoir, which I typically would have told you about separate from these, but this is so 5-star that I didn't want to separate it from my other 5 stars because it's just so good and I want everyone to read it, and that is Pageboy. It's a coming-of-age memoir from Elliot Page talking about his life, all of the bullshit he went through trying to figure out his sexuality, his gender identity, and it's so relatable. This transcends gender, it transcends sexuality, it is so human. And I cried, I thought it was beautiful, I thought it was vulnerable. Ugh. And the audiobook was read by Elliot Page too, which makes it feel a little bit more personal. Honestly, I think Elliot Page is an empath. Just throwing that out there as far as like feeling this energy off of other people. And it must be 10 times, 100 times more for somebody who is trying to figure out their sexuality, trying to figure out their gender and where they fit in the world. But this amount of empathy that he has for people around him at the sacrifice of his own self. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. And I relate to that in a sense because growing up, I also felt like my emotions were invalidated. I felt like when I felt something was wrong and I voiced that, it was shut down. And therefore, I began to hide those emotions and hide those feelings. And that led to an adulthood of people pleasing, of not being able to create boundaries for myself. And those things I feel like I've come so far in overcoming. But Elliot Page has the exact same struggles for similar but also different reasons. And so this story hit me right in the heart. It just hit me right in the heart. So tender, so empathetic, and I just feel like Elliot has like a beautiful soul, and I'm very happy that I read this story, and I think you should too. All right, my next 5-star book is The Whispers by Ashley Audrain. Are we surprised? I think we might be because I gave The Push 3 stars. And I think I went into The Push with the wrong expectations. I also think my reading tastes have evolved since I read The Push. Since I've read so many books, these books that have more to say, that have commentary, really stand out for me now. More so than they used to. They speak to me more. And so this one, it just really hit me in the right spot. This is really all about motherhood and womanhood in general. What Ashley Audrain does so well with this is that play in that gray area of humanity, that middle ground between good and bad, and she really leaves it up to the reader to decide what they think about that. We're following 4 women that live in this affluent neighborhood. Whitney, who has 3 children. She's a working mom. She is the breadwinner for her family, and she's not ashamed of that. She is the woman that puts her career first. Yes, she hires help to take care of her kids. Yes, her home runs more smoothly when she is not there. But she doesn't feel like she needs to make excuses for that. She is the person that we all say we want to be. But then when we actually see someone doing that, we judge them. We judge them. One day she's hosting a birthday party for one of the kids in the neighborhood. All the moms are there, all the people are there. Her older son ends up eating all of the gift bags, all of the doggy bags for the kids, and she screams at him and everybody in the party hears and they start judging. They start judging. And I sound like I'm defending her. I'm really not, because she is a morally gray person as well. In fact, everybody in here is, and that's the whole point. That's why I love this so much. Later on, that same boy falls out of his window. And so we're cutting back and forth between the current day when he's in the hospital, we don't know if he's gonna make it, and also we're going back to kind of the events that led up to this. So we're following Whitney. We're also following another mom who is like the one in the neighborhood that motherhood seems to come easy for her. She always seems to know what to do and what to say, but she is questioning her existence in this family. She's questioning her husband if he actually loves her. She sees maybe he has a wandering eye. We're following a next door neighbor to Whitney, who Mara, I think her name was, who's older, and she's living with her husband over there. She has a traumatic past. She's kind of the ears and the eyes of the neighborhood. Like, she's always there, just like watching, just seeing what's going on. She's not a gossip, but she picks up on a lot that's going on around here. And then we're also following, I think her name was Rebecca, who is a doctor, if not a surgeon, and she is having issues with fertility. She's had miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage, and so many trigger warnings for miscarriage, because it goes deep into it in a graphic way, in a very haunting way. So if you have trouble with that, I might steer clear of this. And so all of these women and how they relate to womanhood and motherhood, and what's going on with this boy who fell out of the window. So much to say in here about the expectations of women and how we value women, and the idea that taking care of the kids is a job. A lot of the same themes actually as the push as well, as far as maybe not connecting with your children the way that you might expect. And also generational trauma. The biggest thing that I took away from this was that nobody's perfect, and everyone is constantly making choices every day that are moving them up or down a little bit on this spectrum that is good and evil. No one is all good. No one is all evil. We are all just trying to navigate the gray. And that is what these women are doing as well. I don't know what else to say. I could go on, but I feel like that sums it up. Finally, we get to my favorite book of the month and my last 5-star, and that is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I was totally late on the train for this one, completely missed the buzz. This was in so many people's best of the year last year, and it sounds like something that I would want to read. Like, hello, we're following a woman in the 1950s, 60s who's daring to be more than her other people's expectations of her. And yeah, that sounds perfect for me, but I don't know what it was. It was like, it was all of the hype, and then I didn't pick it up and I couldn't get the audiobook, and then I got the audiobook and the hype was over and I had missed the train and I just let it go. I was wrong. I was wrong to do that. This book is so good. It's so good. I love Elizabeth Zott so much, and if you missed the train like I did, it is not too late for you. You can still be salvaged from the wreckage of your life prior to Elizabeth Zott. You can still make it right. If you like the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel TV show, then you'll love this one, because they are very similar. She really reminds me of Midge from that TV show. Elizabeth is a scientist, and she makes her daughter's lunches in a very specific, meaningful way, just like she does everything in her life, really. She wants the right nutrients, the right everything, in order to give her daughter the best chance of growing up to be the best version of herself. And so when she finds out that there is another little girl at that school who is stealing her daughter's lunches, she's not having it, and so she goes to yell at this daughter's father, who is a TV producer. Then we flash all the way back to her meeting Calvin, which is her daughter's dad. Oh my God, there are so many moments of this that are so tragic. And so the way the timeline works is we're setting you up in the present, and then we're going back. So the whole time I'm like, okay, but what happened? Because you know that Calvin's not in her life when she's with her daughter. She's a single mom. So this whole time I'm like, I need to know what happened. And so I think that really helped with the pacing of this. And meanwhile, Elizabeth Zott is a scientist above anything else. She is a scientist, and she is determined to not let anyone tell her otherwise. And this is the 1950s when, you know, women were not scientists, not normally anyway. So she's having to push through all these barriers, but her mind is so logical that she doesn't understand why this is a barrier. She's just like, okay, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it. Even when society and very specific people try to deny her value and deny her worth, she persists, and she is loud in the face of it. And she even, like, there are even moments in here that are actually really dark, so maybe look up trigger warnings, but generally this feels like a sitcom. Like, I'm surprised it went there for those couple of scenes that were dark, but it definitely goes to show, you know, that Bonnie Garmis was not going to avoid other parts of this that were reality back then as well. So sexual assault, I'll just say trigger for sexual assault. But the tone of this feels very much like Mrs. Maisel, like the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. The way that her character is written, I can't explain it. It's like these softened edges of reality while also really just driving home the point of what she's trying to say. Elizabeth Zott is just the best character. She ends up on a cooking show, and nobody expects it to do well. She does things her own way. She follows the beat of her own drummer, and it just shows that, like, if you really just be yourself, opportunities will open up for you. Doors will open up for you. And the people that are so unapologetically themselves are the people who those doors open up for, because people see that tenacity and people react to that, whether they do it consciously or not. I don't even know, like, if anything I'm saying is making sense. Also, there's the POV of a dog in here. Her dog is named 630. Why did no one tell me there was the point of view of a dog in this story? Because that would have sold me on it. That would have sold me. Her dog, I can't with the dog. Like, I love the dog so much. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how else to tell you to read this other than just read this already if you have not picked it up, because it's so freaking good. I thought I was going to be a little bit annoyed by the fact that she's just kind of woke for this time, but I don't have a hard time believing that, because I think there were women like that at that time. Women like Frances Glessner Lee, who was one of the people who is the reason why we know about forensics now. Frances Glessner Lee. If you don't know about her, oh man, you got to. I don't even know. I don't have time to get into Frances Glessner Lee right now, but she is an amazing, amazing woman. Lucille Ball. I mean, give me a break. Lucille Ball. I have her tattooed on my arm. She broke the mold for women back then. She owned her own production studio when women weren't doing that. And Elizabeth Zott is a Lucille Ball of STEM. She's the Lucille Ball of STEM. I'm gonna stop it now. I can't. I'm getting very worked up. Okay, I'm calm. We're good. All right, anyway, that's it. Those are all the books that I read this month. In the month of June, it's not even this month anymore, but those are all the books that I read in June. If you watch this all the way to the end, give me like a little science beaker or something sciencey like this in the emojis down below so that I know you saw it to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked it. And I appreciate all of you so much. Please let me know what your favorite book was that you read this month or last month down below in the comments. And don't forget that life is short, so read Riley. Cheers and goodbye.